Welcome to today's City Council meetings. Our meetings are public and you're welcome to join in person or by watching from the Council's agenda page, Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, or SLC TV. Today is Thursday, May 25th, and today is a work session only meeting, which means there is no public comment. Our next opportunity for public comment is June 6th during our 7 p.m. formal meeting, and we, of course, always welcome your feedback at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, council.comments@slcgov.com, or at 801-535-7654. Anything that is received on, any written comments received on agenda-related topics are shared with all council members and posted on slccouncil.com. So we are going to switch our agenda around just a little bit. Thank you for being here. Sorry, we need to do unresolved issues real quickly. A short version of that before Jennifer Bruno needs to leave. Sorry. And I think we're mostly receiving new information about attorney's office. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I was just going to briefly highlight the new information, some other new information that's been clarified in both the tracking sheet and the unresolved issues staff report. So let's see, first to go to the, maybe first talking about the prosecutors and Legal Defenders Association issue. We staff had some clarity today about maybe a potential misunderstanding, and we just wanted to make sure that it was clear for the council. I think there are two separate issues going on, but depending on the conclusion in issue number 1, that impacts the dollar amount needed for issue number 2. So I have a visual. Scott, can I share my screen? Let's see. Or you know what, I'll skip it. So the first issue is equity between the city prosecutors and the county prosecutors. And that has been raised by the county district attorney based on an adjustment that the county prosecutors made to be equivalent to the state pay scale. So right now, the city prosecutors are not at the level of the county prosecutors. The mayor's recommended budget does have some increase for the city prosecutors, but it does not get them to equity with the county prosecutors. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is equity with the Legal Defenders Association and the city prosecutors. As Councilmember Wharton has pointed out, they are in the same courtroom. But depending on your approach to issue number 1, that affects the dollar amount you need to fix issue number 2. So in the current budget, as it is proposed, the LDA does not get to equity with the city prosecutors, but it also does not get to equity with the state pay scale, which I believe is a goal of some of the conversations we've heard about the legal defenders. So what we just wanted to make sure is that the council understood that, so that we understand how the issues, even if council members are not interested in addressing issue number 1, but are interested in addressing issue number 2, the dollar amount is different.
Can I restate this and make sure I'm understanding you? So the county prosecutors were raised to match the state prosecutors. The city prosecutors are not yet matched to that. The legal defenders are not, the LDA are not matched to either the city prosecutors now, and of course not if we raise the city prosecutors.
Right.
And not, oh, thanks.
Sorry. So this is a really, really, really draft visual.
Okay, so the pay scale and the county prosecutors are the same.
Right.
That was
now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. Okay.
And I guess, this is not to scale, right? This is essentially represents what is in the mayor's recommended budget now, although actually the arrow for LDA is probably not quite to that line. So the arrow for LDA, what the number that has been discussed with some council members would get the LDA to that line that is not equivalent to the county prosecutors.
So
Okay. So if you wanted to have both equivalent to the county prosecutors, you would need to increase both. And I'm going to fix this visual so that it'll make sense in a minute. But we were trying to make sense of it in our own heads, our own staff minds. And I think that because there have been different conversations, I don't know that we have the right number.
So the numbers in here are not yet.
We have the number. The administration has been working with the county to get clarity on the number to get the city prosecutors equivalent with the county prosecutors. So I have more faith in that number and what the administration, yes, the 322. And actually, I think that there was some confusion about the 322. I think it's actually 302. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing.
Council members, I'm barely following, but are the rest of you following?
I'm with you.
Right now, we're,
Okay.
the 302, the 302 is the discrepancy between the city prosecutor and the county prosecutors.
Yes,
But we don't
LDA has not entered the conversation at all.
right.
We don't know the number for LDA.
Right.
The number in here is 122, but we're saying that number is most,
122 gets them to the current
we don't know.
status.
That's the issue is
Okay,
that
correct.
because, yes,
So
we
it would
don't know.
actually be 122 plus 302 or 322, depending on,
I think that
Add
it would be
those.
speculation
Because there
to,
are different number of each
Theoretically.
of those people, right?
okay. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, I see.
And we don't have the information from the county.
to be able to calculate.
From the LDA.
Okay.
So I think what staff will try to do is figure out what is this council's policy goal? So is the council's policy goal to have the LDA and city prosecutors be equivalent, but not to have the city prosecutors and the county's prosecutors to be equivalent? If that's the council's policy goal, then we can shelve the 322. But then what that means is that the LDA is not at the state pay scale. And I think
Okay.
that there's an assumption that the city prosecutors will be at the state pay scale, and they will not.
Council members, is there anyone that wants to sort of state where, if they want, I guess the question is there one of those options that we would like staff not to figure out? Because I think they're trying to figure out like 7 different options. I'm assuming everyone wants to know all the numbers, but is there a situation, Councilmember Pui?
So obviously there's a lot of missing pieces of information on this, and I think that maybe the best way to go about it is to share our thoughts about that we want this to be solved or find a solution, but then do it as in a budget amendment soon after the budget, when we actually find out the numbers and where we can have a discussion of what actually we want.
Do we think that we can't get this before budget?
We honestly don't know and have no way to predict. We have nothing from the LDA,
I am all
numbers.
I am all for alleviating pressure on staff during the highest pressure time of the year for them, but I would like to put some kind of placeholder in there so that we're not inadvertently creating more of a structural deficit for ourselves. So whatever we guesstimate would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that means we can figure out potentially some number.
Okay,
that
so
puts
put
us
an
in the
amount
same-
in a holding account,
Yeah.
whatever, in unresolved issue, or in
I'd also-
non-departmental.
To share maybe a general conversation about, do we agree that graph there that you with the arrows that
Yeah, sorry,
was
I'll share it
placed
again.
on? Do we believe? I think that maybe it's important for us to discuss that. The LDA box should be at the same level than the city prosecutors, and not necessarily about the county level, because we might not have that this year. But it is my argument, and I think maybe other council members believe the same way, that they should be similar. Those 2 boxes should be in the same place. No, I wish we could do it all the way up, but at least they should be there. Right?
And my
So
question, go
The
ahead.
first priority is to get those 2 boxes the same. Second priority would get those 2 boxes the same and at the same as county and state. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
State scale.
Dugan?
My question is also, or clarification, the LDAs and the city prosecutors are different pay scales. Are they this, they're not the same pay scale? Or are they the same
They're
pay?
in separate organizations.
They're separate
Yeah,
organizations?
so it's a nonprofit and then county government.
right.
That, I mean, they're on the city pay scale,
Okay,
but they work for SIM.
but they work for SIM. So
Yeah.
the question is, because right now the discrepancy, as we all are saying, that there's a discrepancy between the city prosecutors and LDAs as far as pay is concerned. And the idea is that we would bring the LDA up to equal to the city prosecutor's pay scale, and then those up to the county pay scale
As a secondary.
as a
if we,
secondary.
you know,
That's what you're looking at.
Yes, that we can first match those two boxes on the same level, and hopefully in the future, move it up to the county level, which
Okay.
is the state level.
I could share those priorities easily.
So I'm open to the idea of raising the salaries. I want to just understand the experience levels to be a city prosecutor compared to the experience level required to be a LDA. And I don't know, these are the questions I don't know about.
They're working on the same cases, just on different sides of the aisle, right? One are prosecuting the case,
Right, one
and
is
the other side defending. But an attorney might be a better person to explain this.
I guess to me, I think it's more important that you have parity on both sides of the aisle in the same courtroom than it is to have parity between a city prosecutor and a county prosecutor. And I would like to have parity between the city prosecutor and the county prosecutor, but that's a much bigger jump and then requires us to make an even bigger jump on LDA. But for me, like the county has an entirely different budget. They have a different compensation package and all of that. And I think even though they both have the label of prosecutor and some of them are probably doing substantially similar work, whether they're employed by the city or employed by the county. I think it would be, because they're funded by two different government entities, one the county and one the city, I think that the discrepancy there is not one that we can control entirely, whereas we have more control over the discrepancy of two attorneys that are literally in the same courtroom arguing the same cases. Just one's on defense and one's on prosecution.
Councilmember Wharton, is it true to say that the city prosecutors are arguing a certain level of offense and county prosecutors are arguing a higher level of offense? Like, am I an architect designing a 4-plex or a 12-plex?
Yes.
But we're doing the same work, but one's a much more complex building.
Yes, most county prosecutors are in district court, the vast majority of them, which are higher level cases. There are some district attorney prosecutors that are in the county justice court, which are doing basically the same thing that our city prosecutors are doing. But there are also some of our city prosecutors that are in district court that are doing what?
Okay, so it's not as clear.
So, well, not quite, but I think it's more comparable. I think most county prosecutors, on the whole, are doing higher level offenses than city
Okay.
prosecutors on the whole.
I would also like to move that should new growth come in at a higher rate than what's been projected, that this be the priority for where those funds would go. It feels like this is a pretty urgent need, and I would like the opportunity during budget deliberations to find out why this amendment has been so irregularly handled. I know this was not provided to the administration in a timely manner, and I would like to find out why we are having to do double and triple time to make up for that. That's potentially a big administrative oversight I want time to question.
I would love to add to this point right here that, maybe I would like to ask the administration about streamlining the contract with LDA. And I'm not talking only about the prosecutor, I know you probably are, but it is also, there is some weird holes of information from the other side too, and I think it comes from we contracting directly with the LDA instead of going through the county. for these services and the county handling this, which might streamline everything. So maybe I would like the administration to explore that possibility, which might give us a little more clear answers in the future.
Okay. I'll share my thoughts. I think I agree after Councilmember Wharton and Councilmember Pui's comments. I think I agree that priority one would be parity in the same courtroom, and then priority two, which I would also like to do, would be matching the county. But I will say that given the number of things on this list and the fact that we may not be able to, I'm not yet at personally where this is like my top priority, but I am not opposed to being convinced that it should be my top priority. But right now, if the dollars end up not working for some of these other things, I'm not quite sure that it's going to, it's somewhere in the middle for me, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mr. Chair, I kind of agree with you also on that one, LDA up to the city side of the house, and if we can then go closer to the county side as much as possible, within our need or within our means, then I'm appreciative of that. As far as which priority is first, there's so many priorities right now. I'm not sure which is the top of the up.
This isn't
of the
an
100.
all or none thing,
No.
right? We can
No,
do
and we don't need to
halfway.
resolve
We don't
it.
need it.
Yeah.
We don't need
Okay.
It was more to update the council that almost like to put a caution flag out there that some of the numbers that are being
Right.
discussed are not achieving the policy goals that people are assuming they're achieving.
Okay.
But this is a good discussion.
I think I'm hearing that, yes, please do still work on that, but if it means that we need to put some money in a holding account and figure this out after budget, council members are okay with that.
And then there were just a couple of new items in the unresolved issue staff report. I don't need to go over all of them, but if you could take a look at them, that would be great. There's some clarifications on the numbers needed for the lifestyle savings account. Council added, we had forgotten to add previously when the council received the budget briefing on the airport and mentioned an interest in further discussing the airport parking lot. So we added that in on page 4, just to an item to discuss further. And then staff has been adding draft legislative intents as we've been talking to council members individually. And so just take a look at those legislative intents and let us know if you have any changes or additions. And that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's going to be probably a new copy every day. Sorry
So-
to the trees.
Can you, is it worth explaining the lifestyle savings account updated information?
Sure. The administration has identified that there was some additional one-time funding in the Insurance and Risk Management Fund, which is the fund where employee benefits are paid out of. So this is an appropriate expense there. Based on our timing and our transition to Workday, there was one whole payment to the city's insurance fund that was not needed. So that dropped to the Insurance and Risk Management Fund balance, which then freed up essentially a bunch of money to use for this purpose. So whereas we told you on Tuesday that you would need to find an additional 600 and something thousand to fund this program fully, you now only have to find 200,000. So
That's good
that's
news.
good.
So it's like when you move from an apartment to a mortgage, you have like a free month sort of
Yeah,
thing?
sure.
Okay. That's weird. Yes, go
I
ahead.
have a question. Jen, I think in the past you have had like this list as in green and red so that we know what the red is. So how much are we, if this was passed today, how much in the red are we? Or are we still within our?
What does red mean?
Yeah,
we
like
don't
how
have
much
the
are we
money.
out of
We have
balance?
how much
I think
more
that it's a little different this year because the
Okay.
funding sources are different. All of those housing funds, we're working on clarifying with the administration the extent to which some of those dormant HUD funds are. And so that would mean that that would change the dollar amount
the red.
essentially
So-
by many millions of dollars. Maybe I think by next Thursday, we may have more clarity on that and we'll be able to let you know.
Okay.
I think one piece of information related to your question, though, Councilmember Valdemoros, that I think I understand, but I would like Jennifer to help clarify is, depending, like, does the number turn red when we hit the 13% or the
Yeah.
10%, right? Because aren't we already under the 13%?
You're not under the 13%, but you only have 700,000 above.
To get to 13%.
To get to 13,
And then to
and
get to
then-
the 10%, which is what we really need to stay for our credit rating, our bond rating, right?
Yeah. For your 10%, you have about 12 million. So I don't think there's a danger of going below the 10%. there's very much a danger of going below the 13%.
Okay.
Okay, but 12 million, okay, so if we're okay going down the 10%, which I'm not saying I am, but if we really have 12 million of
Sorry.
fund balance,
You have 12 million of fund balance above the 10%.
above the 10%.
But just remember that the fund balance is what you use to pay for budget amendments throughout the year.
I understood, yes.
So-
And I
Right.
don't
need a
want to
little
go to 10,
cushion.
but I'm just, like, that's the
Thank
range.
you.
Dan?
And I think, thank you very much for that clarification, because that line, I draw closer to 12% or higher is my personal line, is like, okay, I want to stay above 12%, and I would rather stay even closer to the 13%, but that's the kind of line that I'm using when I'm doing this, and that's what you took
And
at
so
the top of the.
for that reference, we added in a line so that you have that 12% figure. You're 4.6 million above.
There's a
12%.
line there somewhere?
Yeah, it's in the revenue
Nine.
Oh, on the chart.
On the
there's
chart.
a line 9.
line 9.
Oh, one-time general fund balance over 12%. Okay.
So
I mean,
hopefully,
that feels like a reasonable goal to me, Councilmember Dugan, but
Right.
thanks. Thank you.
thank you, Jennifer. All right, so that's unresolved issues for tonight. Sorry, community and neighborhoods. But we are now going to talk about the new 5-year housing plan called Housing SLC.
Thank you, and no need to apologize. We know you have a lot going on with the budget right now. I just want to quickly tee up Housing SLC, the city's new 5-year housing plan. And thank you guys so much for your time and consideration over the past, almost year that we've been working on this. It's really been a collaborative effort with almost every department in the city and has piggybacked quite a bit on the Thriving in Place initiative that the city's been working on. We've had excellent support from the University of Utah doing community outreach for us on this, and also the same consultant that has worked on Thriving in Place has also helped with some of the outreach and engagement on this. Baird and Driscoll out of Seattle. I just want to tee up really quickly that we've had 2 really big changes to the moderate income housing plans in the past 2 legislative sessions, both this year and last year. And so it's caused us to do quite a bit of pivoting in how we write our moderate income housing plan and how we had to respond to our previous moderate income housing plan. And so we have been working really hard with the League and with the Department of Workforce Services to make sure that our plan, which is one of the very first plans to come out of these new requirements, is in compliance with state code. And that has been a really big lift on our part, both pivoting, in March, knowing once the bill passed what changes we were going to have. So we appreciate your patience as we've been working through those issues and making sure that our plan is in compliance. One of the really exciting changes that we've made during the legislative session is tying compliance to this plan to priority consideration for all kinds of different funding sources from the state, including transportation funding, funding out of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, and other grant opportunities. So we've successfully, again this year, fielded off threats of, if you're not in compliance, that you have penalties against your city. And so I'm really excited about the work that we've done here. Rudy has done a fantastic job of coordinating this plan, basically writing the entire thing himself with input from all of the city departments and coordinating engagement with our consultant team and our civic engagement team. So I just want to give him a lot of credit for all of the work that he's done here. And again, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to the questions that you guys have. And just a reminder that we'll submit this to the state by the end of June to ensure that we're in compliance with those state code requirements. And then we'll be submitting a report to the state in the beginning of August, letting them know that we've adopted an implementation plan and that we have selected, I believe, 19 strategies here in Salt Lake City. So not only are we having a tremendous impact on our community and housing over the next 5 years, but also really setting an example at the state level of how to do housing policy. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Rudy.
Thanks, Angela.
Thanks.
Hi,
And
Rudy,
Hi, thanks for having me.
for being here.
Feel free to go to the next slide, please. As Angela mentioned, this has been a long process. And with, last time I was here, we talked about the key findings and the engagement that we did. Between TIP, or Thriving in Place, and Housing SLC, we interacted with over 6,000 individuals, got their feedback, and that has really helped inform what we've done. And so just as an overview, in Housing SLC, we have 3 goals that are kind of the primary drivers of the plan. Those goals are supported by, it's 18 moderate income housing strategies of the list of 24 that the state lets us choose from. And then those 18 moderate income housing strategies are supported by 47 unique action items. And then just as a reminder, this is a 5-year plan, so it'll be implemented over the next 5 years. Guiding framework, which in this is shared with Thriving in Place, but we hope to preserve affordable housing, protect tenants, produce new affordable housing, expand capacity for tenant support, collaborate to maximize our impact, and advocate for tenants and affordable housing at the state level. Next slide, please. So jumping into the goals, goal 1 is to make progress toward closing the housing gap of 5,500 units of deeply affordable housing and increase the supply of housing at all levels of affordability. And the metric that we're using to measure kind of how we're doing against this goal is to entitle 10,000 new housing units throughout the city over the next 5 years, a minimum of 2,000 units being deeply affordable. So that's affordable for households earning 30% of the area median income or below, and a minimum of 2,000 units affordable between 30 and 80% AMI. So in total, there would be 4,000 new units of affordable housing.
What period of time?
Over the next 5 years.
5 years, okay.
Yeah. And so go on to the next slide, please. Okay, goal 2 is to increase housing stability throughout the city. And I'll just mention housing stability is one of those terms that kind of has a lot of different meanings, but I think it's best defined by its opposite. So because housing instability has a more thorough definition, and that is kind of marked by unstable or having trouble paying rent, experiencing overcrowding, moving frequently, or spending the bulk of household income on housing. So all of those kind of result in housing instability, and there's more factors that go into that. So housing stability would be the opposite of that, and so we want to make sure that people have stable living throughout the city. And so the ways that we're trying to do that are to track, analyze, and monitor factors that impact housing stability. So essentially better data collection and better data monitoring than what we currently have. The second metric would be to assist 10,000 low-income individuals annually through programs that the city funds to increase housing stability. Those could either be direct service models, programs that the city runs itself, or that we fund partners to run. And then the third is to dedicate targeted funding towards mitigating displacement, serving renter households, serving family households, increasing geographic equity, and increasing physical accessibility of our city and our housing stock. Next slide, please. The third goal is to increase opportunities for home ownership and other wealth and equity building opportunities. This is something that we heard a lot from people, especially given the outrageous housing, for sale housing market, that has happened over the last couple of years. And so the metric is to provide affordable home ownership and wealth and equity building opportunities to a minimum of 1,000 low-income households over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. Angela mentioned briefly kind of some changes to state requirements. And so this slide shows the requirements on one side, and then there's a check mark saying that we're doing it. So we must select at least 5 strategies out of a potential 24, and we have included 18. We must include at least 6 strategies to be eligible for priority consideration for funding. And again, we include 18. We must include strategy V, and I can get into kind of what those strategies are, but that one's related to station area plans. That was another part of the same bill. So we must include strategy V, which we do. We must include at least one of strategies G, H, or Q. G is related to parking reductions. H is related to increasing density around transit lines. And Q is related to housing and transit reinvestment zones. And we have opted to include all of those rather than just selecting one. And the final requirement that I'll touch on is that we need to include an implementation plan, and we do. So it breaks down each action item and how we kind of a timeline for how we will meet those over the next 5 years. Move on to the next slide, please. So I just want to touch on the public comment period that we did ahead of the 45-day, or ahead of the public hearing at Planning Commission. So on March 2nd, this went public, and we were able to start the 45-day period. We notified all of the relevant groups and then also sent it out beyond that as well. The next day, the Planning Division has a listserv that they sent it out through. And then between March 2nd and April 26th, which is when the Planning Commission public hearing was, the plan was up, and a comment form was available for people. The plan is still up on that same website, and people should read. And then I was also accepting comments through email through that period. I presented to Planning Commission on March 8th and March 29th, and received feedback from them. March 22nd, March 23rd, and April 5th, I presented to, by the request of community organizations, presented to 2 different community organizations and 1 city commission, and all those were by invitation. I will note, like in the email that the notice that I sent out, I offered that I would present at any upon request, and I got a couple. So, and then we also tabled at a couple of events, one being the city council meeting that y'all held at the Fair Park. And then I presented to the Salt Lake Community Network on April 20th, and Planning Commission public hearing was on the 26th. So we really tried to not just have this live online, but tried to be out meeting people. And the Homeless Resource Fair that we tabled at and the council meeting, we got a lot of feedback from those. So, I think that the comments to some extent reflect the work that we put in. And so on the next slide, we'll get into kind of what we heard during the comment period. So so we had 107 respondents to the online comment form. 59% of respondents identified as owners, which kind of was in opposition to how when we did our initial engagement to kind of inform what the plan would have, a full 45% were identified as renters. And so this was a little bit more owner heavy. And overall, there was a positive response to the plan. 51% of respondents felt that Housing SLC meets the needs of the city very well or somewhat well, with about 10% who were neutral. And as I mentioned earlier, in the development of the plan, we did hear from 6,000 people and kind of tried to cater a little bit to kind of that large bulk group of feedback that we received. And so getting kind of a general positive response we felt was good. Some of the themes that we heard included a desire for increased clarity. The way that it was presented on the website, I think, posed a disconnect between kind of how the goals were stated and how we'd actually do them. And so we tried to make that tie a little bit more clear in the plan. through some revisions. And then we heard both support for and opposition to more housing and more affordable housing. And it was kind of generally a little bit of a mixed bag on the comments that we received.
I would love to know the percentage breakdown of the comments for that. Could you provide that?
Yeah, and I think that I provided it in the transmittal, but there is an engagement, a 45-day engagement report that, and if it's not there, I will make sure to send that. And you can read kind of we included all the comments that we received in that. So if you like reading through public comments, there you go. You have them. And then we also received 5 email responses. 3 were from organizations and 2 were from individuals. Again, there was general support for the plan. The 2 of the 3 organizations that commented pointed out some omissions that we had around physical accessibility, and so we did take that into consideration and revised the plan to include more elements to allow people to age in place and or to create more physical accessibility in the city. And then there were multiple comments on the ADU ordinance, which I think was the public comment for both public comment periods for the ADU ordinance and this kind of overlapped, and I think that there was a little bit of overlap in how people were expressing themselves. And then there was one comment at Planning Commission that an individual felt that there were some elements of the proposal missing. There wasn't, in the brief public comment, there wasn't a whole lot offered on that. But we tried to respond to the public comments as best we could. So if you move on to the next slide. This will reiterate a little bit of what I just said, but we did try to make changes and adjustments where we saw themes emerging, and 2 of those were the inclusion of more elements that would relate to physical accessibility, and then also changes to improve the clarity in both the goals and the metrics, as well as how we would do those, how we would kind of implement those over 5 years. So those were the kind of 2 big things that we did in response to the public comment that we received. Next slide. And then at the end of the Planning Commission hearing, and it was the end of the Planning Commission hearing at around 10:15 p.m., they made a motion to recommend to that the City Council adopt. And so it does come with a favorable recommendation from Planning Commission. And I believe that is, there's probably like a question slide, but I think that's the last content slide that I have. But I am now happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Rudy. I'm just looking through the engagement report. It's really interesting.
I have a few
Councilmember
questions.
Valdemoros, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, so thank you for the presentation and for the work. I had just a few general thoughts or questions for you so that we bring all of that to the minds of the public so they understand, and also us what kind of impact we're doing with this or we're hoping to do in the next 5 years with this. So one of the questions I have, and that's kind of like a moving target in terms of the AMI. So we said we want to help the 30 and lower, and then the 30 to 80. In salary dollars, what does that mean for a Salt Lake City resident? Like, if I make this much, will I get help or not? Like, do we have that information?
Let me just see real quick. Do you have that breakdown? Sorry.
The number's going to be different for a family and a single person.
It changes, but we can.
But more and less, so that we know.
Yeah.
So those that are listening or are thinking, Salt Lake City will help. Potentially, I could qualify for some help because right now I can afford housing. But anyway.
So, for example, 80% AMI for a family of 4 is $81,900.
Okay.
50% would be $51,200. 50% for a single person is $35,850. I'm just throwing out some
That's fine.
examples, but it's adjusted by household size.
Okay, for 50% for one person, what was it, 30?
50% for one person is 35,850.
Okay,
And so for, it actually may have just been updated, but for fiscal year 22, it was 102,400 is the AMI for a family of 4. So that's 100% AMI.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that AMI is set at, here locally, it's set at the county level.
County level,
So that it's a little bit different at the city level.
So every single resident in the county is included when
Yeah,
calculating the AMI.
HUD issues the data at the county level, not the city level.
okay. All
Thanks
right.
for clarifying that.
Thank you. And then I have another question. So it looks like it's ambitious, like the numbers that we're going to do 1,000 units here, and that's great because I think we need to go for all of it, and hopefully we can get as close as possible. But I was wondering in terms of like our population, like percentages that we might be helping. Like what's the I know how many people we have here in Salt Lake City, but I was wondering, like, I think that we can help 50% of the people that are at the 30% AMI. If, in 5 years, we'll be able to help this many people. Do we have something like that for this
I don't know that I have a full kind of percentage breakdown. I think I will just say that's also difficult to project because housing is like, it's not a geographically closed area. So building housing locally, like it affects the region. And so somebody from South Salt Lake who is not in our current count may move into one of the units if it becomes available. So I think for that reason, it gets a little bit tricky to kind of give percentages. But I can say, like, we would be, sorry, looking at some of the notes that I had. In terms of the number of affordable units, we would be increasing the output of affordable units from what we've currently done. So we've been making good progress, and this would kind of ramp that up so that even if people were moving in, we would be serving a significant amount more than what we currently are.
Can I ask the same question in another way? You said we're making good progress. Are we catching up, or is the need outpacing the increase in housing? And well, I guess right now, are we catching up, or are we still falling further behind?
So I was just looking at the affordable housing dashboard that the city kind of posts online, and that uses 2019 data. And so at least at the deeply affordable level, like, we have made some progress. And I think at all levels of affordability, we have made some progress. That said, and I think I've talked to you about this, Chair Mano, is that, like, it's a tricky number because it takes it kind of as a zero sum, where these are the number of houses, these are the number of people who are housed, and these are where they live. And so it is a little bit tricky to say for certain.
So actually, okay, so my second question is the 5,500 number that is, I think it was said that's the number of deeply affordable housing units that are needed. What exactly does that number mean? Is that same zero-sum game?
Yeah.
So we actually probably need more than 5,000 because we're not, that calculation of 5,500 doesn't include people that don't even have a house. Is that true, or am I hearing that wrong, understanding that wrong?
I think that would be true in that there's a shortage of 5,500 units, meaning that there are 5,500 households that
are paying
that
too
are
much.
in Salt Lake, that are living here, that are paying more than what than they qualify for, right? They would qualify for a 30% AMI.
They're paying 60,
house, and they
or
might be
80.
paying, they might be paying 32 or 50 or 60%. And so by
And that's the
increasing
actual amount that they're paying for rent, not whether or not it's a truly subsidized or naturally occurring affordable unit, right?
Well, the data it's hard to get to that level of detail. So it's essentially taking census data, household data, and looking at household income, and then looking at what the maximum rent a family at all those households can afford, which is 30% of that income, and then matching it up with data on rents.
Okay.
So some of those
But
households.
the rent data does include market rate, affordable, and
Yes,
truly
yes, it
deed
does.
restricted affordable. Okay.
And I would add, just to the unit discussion, the plan is looking at supporting the creation of units, but also housing services. So there's rental assistance tied in there as well. And a lot of times that rental assistance is going to the lower AMIs.
I got one more question
Councilmember
related
Alvarez,
to
go
that.
ahead.
So the 1,500 households, I understand they're spending more than 30% of their income, so those are the ones that we need to help. But because we're submitting this to the state, is that 5,500 number a state requirement? Hey, you need to help at least 5,500 people, or is it an arbitrary number that we're saying, hey, we think that 5,500 households are suffering because they're spending more money. In
So the 5,500 number came through a housing needs analysis that we at the city did.
Okay.
And the state only requires that we have a plan that addresses housing for people earning 80% AMI or below.
Oh, okay. That's a good one.
And so we have said that we also, care deeply about people who are kind of on extremely low incomes. And so so the focus that we have on the deeply affordable is kind of going, I wouldn't say totally above and beyond because it's totally allowable within the housing plan structure of the state, but it is setting a kind of a priority that we're going to focus on the households that need it most, as well as the housing units that are most expensive to build and that the market is just not going to build on its own.
Okay.
So are
Great,
we,
thank you.
of the 25 strategies that the state puts in, deeply affordable doesn't even show up? Wow. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Councilman Dugan.
So I appreciate the discussion because I'm looking at page 15 on your the report, the draft plan, and it's kind of it's an interesting graph. It talks about the 5,500 that you have below 30%, but then it says we have a surplus between 30 and 80% of almost 14,000 homes, and then we have a deficit of incomes 80 plus. We have a deficit of 7,000 or 8,000 homes. So the 80 to 120%, we're not focused on those. We're still focused on the 30 to 80. Is it the idea that if we focus on those, because that is definitely a market that needs them, that will support some of those housing going into the 80 to 120,000 AMI? Is that why you focus there?
Yeah, and so and in the plan, there's the overall 10,000 goal of 10,000 new units, and bringing that online will kind of increase supply and help ease demand pressures a little bit. But then there's data kind of nationwide that talks about if you create housing at the most affordable level, then that kind of broadens the base, and those people don't have to rent up, occupying the units that people at the 30 to 80% need. And then, because one of the things that, because we have a deficit up at top, and this is true not even if there were a deficit, but households who have kind of the means to afford what they want, they might choose a very affordable place to live in a good neighborhood that's close to where they work or close to school, that's taking that housing unit away from somebody who actually needs the deeply affordable. So because there's greater housing choice the higher your income goes, we want to create more housing choice kind of at the lower end of the income scale so that households can have their needs met, that then will help filter things up. And yeah.
So then that pushes those houses now to the more affluent.
Is your microphone on, Councilman Dugan?
No, it was not.
Yeah, just flattening the curves by building them at the lower end by the middle side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
I think did I miss any comments? Okay. I think my general takeaway is great work. I'm excited that we're going so far above and beyond the state minimum, but I would also say that, or the state requirement is nowhere near enough. And I still think that though this may be a lofty goal, I still don't think, like, it clearly doesn't solve the problem in 5 years. The problem still exists in 5 years, even if we make this lofty goal. So I guess I'm just saying that to, not to criticize the plan, but to say that even with our this plan that we have spent all this time and energy engaging on, we're getting to 2,000 out of 5,500, even though we know that 5,500 might be artificially low, right? Like, even if we make all of these goals, we're still only accomplishing a third of what's actually needed. So I guess I'm just saying this is incredibly important, and I'm sad that we can't get to 100% of the need faster. So we just need to move as quickly as we can on housing. Councilmember Pui.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So to this point, I would like to maybe all of us to talk to our lobbying team with the administration to make sure that we are pushing the state a little harder on this, or getting buy-in from the state to increase their limits and their minimums across the board. Obviously, this is an issue that is not an issue for Salt Lake alone, but we need to have a coordinated effort with the League of Cities and Towns as a problem that it shouldn't be only for the capital city to solve, and every jurisdiction in this state needs to be on the same page. So I would like us to put that in the agenda when we're talking to our lobbying team as a priority number one. I know that we're always doing that, but I wanted to put it on the record, and it's very important to have a specific goal. Say, these minimums are too low. Can you increase them, right? Like, so it's a specific ask to our lobbying team to see if we can do that. And the second question to this is, I see in the action items and the transmittal, the ordinance regarding to historic buildings to be transferred to be converted into housing. And I don't know, I might have missed this, but are there need for commercial buildings, i.e. office buildings, to be converted into housing? I know that many states in the country are doing that. Many cities in the country are doing that. Denver, our office, my private office, we got kicked out because they were transferring the building into housing, which I thought it was fantastic for Colfax Avenue. So it's happening across the board. Many companies are not coming back to their offices. They're keeping this hybrid way of working. So I wonder if we need to do some changes in our ordinance to facilitate some of this. I don't know. I would like your opinion on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID kind of changed the way offices are used a little bit. And I think while we don't call out specifically conversion of like commercial buildings, we do have conversion of non-residential buildings or hotels, motels, and things like that. And then, but I think that we leave it open that could extend beyond kind of the hotel motel realm into other things. We would have to take a look, and that's the one thing, like with this plan, it doesn't get into the specific details all the time of like that would require ordinance change X, Y, or Z. But as we're going through this, if we see, especially if somebody comes to us with a project saying we would like to convert this office building into housing, I think that we would have to take a look at our ordinances. I don't know if right off the top of my head if we would need a change in the ordinance to do that, but this plan certainly leaves open the possibility that we could do that as it came up.
There one more question.
Go ahead, Councilmember Valdemoros.
So I read in the news, and probably Angela and y'all, that was it President of the Senate, Stuart Adams, that he had some sort of funding for home ownership. How does, and I'm not sure what the AMIs, like who qualifies for that home ownership. How does this plan relate to that law and those fundings? I mean, since we have it, can we have it done? We're the first ones probably to have it done and really ambitious. Can you help us? Like, we want to apply for those funds.
Yeah, a couple of things. So just to address Council Members Pui's comments, we had a lot of conversation about increasing the minimum number of strategies that a city would have to select. And there was a lot of pushback from other cities that they were struggling to even get to the 3 or 4 or 5. And so that's just an ongoing conversation that we're having. And, you know, the league, as always, as we know, threading that needle there. But certainly something that we're pushing constantly of please, this is a statewide issue, not just housing, but homelessness as well. And we all need to step up. The other piece.
Can I jump in on that point just real quick? I'm sorry. Councilmember Pui, thank you so much for saying what I was trying to say in a much more productive and clear way. We're required to do 5 strategies. We're doing 18, and even still we're projected to potentially hit a third of our need in our city. Yeah. So if all the cities are only doing the bare minimum, we can only imagine how long this housing crisis is going to go on. And when you talk about threading the needle between cities that don't want to do housing and cities and that need of housing, I'll just say on the record, that is not a needle that we need to be threading. I'm sorry, I'm done worrying about the neighbors, the wealthy housed neighbors' quality of life when other people are dying on our streets. So that is no longer, that needs to be something that other cities, other municipalities, and residents in our own community realize. It's so imbalanced, the history of laws in our country that have made it so that people do not have housing, and that the people that do have so many additional rights over the others. So thank you for fighting that fight, and tell me anything I can do to help us push harder on other cities.
I agree. I think we've come a long way in the past few years, but it is incredibly frustrating. I hear you. I'm in those meetings every day fighting that fight. And by threading the needle, I mean cities pushing back against, having to do more strategies and what that means for their community. And so...
May I ask a little?
Yeah.
So I think it is important to me, and I don't want, as a person and as an elected official, to know what those cities are, because I can try to meet with some of these council members and mayors as an individual, but also as a council member for a district that is growing up a lot, and and I know that there might be some thoughts about that, but I feel very strongly about this issue, and I feel like if we can get a list of some of these cities, I will definitely love to know. And I know that it's awkward, but it really is important to all of us to be on board. And if I can go with coffee and try to make sense with a council member or in another city to move the needle, I think I'm willing to do that. So.
That's great. Thank you. I'll work with Kate and the league on getting some of those names and those lists together for you guys. I think speaking to your peers is incredibly important, as we do within the league board and the realms that we have with them. The other point that I'll say is I was in the Land Use Task Force negotiating meeting yesterday afternoon. I was in the Commission on Housing Affordability Policy meeting this morning, and there's a lot of conversation around these vacant buildings that are office buildings that are sitting empty, that could be, some cities are holding on to those for economic purposes and to create that tax base, and how we can reutilize those spaces for housing. So that's a conversation that's happening at the state level. It was happening this year, but I think it's heating up even more right now. So know that that's something that's very much on the table. And then to your question, Councilmember Valdemoris, on President Adams' $50 million in first-time home buyer funding. This was something that Councilmember Dugan actually testified on in committee. And The bill as it's drafted has $450,000 new construction. I believe that the AMI was 80%. I'd have to look, but I'll follow up with you on the specifics on that. We've been having in those two meetings that I just brought up are kind of the kickoff of what policies we're going to be working on during the interim. I can tell you there's over 100 policies on the table right now, both from the cities and from the Property Rights Coalition. And the foundation of those policies, I think, are really centered around being able to utilize that first-time home buyer funding and being able to get people into home ownership opportunities. To your point, Councilmember Mono, just really breaking down those inequities that we've seen entrenched not only in Utah but across the country. So there's a lot of work and conversation happening around that. Councilmember Dugan did a really great job in testifying against that bill, or I'm sorry, in support of that bill, but saying that it's challenging for residents in Salt Lake to be able to utilize that funding because $450,000 is really hard to get new construction in Salt Lake City. And so Councilmember Dugan, both in his testimony and in conversations with the organization overseeing those funds, was asking if there's opportunity to revisit that. And I don't know if you have anything else to add there, but I think there's some great opportunities there. I would love to, I've been talking with Tammy about how we can leverage not just that money that we got from the state, but we saw quite a bit of capital infused into housing this year. And so I know the bites are small of the apple. I feel the frustration. I get it. I think this year we had the most money and most policy in housing that we've had in over 20 years in legislative session. So we're making progress. It's often slower than we certainly want it to be, and it certainly does feel like we take a brunt of all of that here in Salt Lake City. So I feel your pain and hear your passion, and always happy to help facilitate any conversations that I can help you guys with. So
thank you very much, Angela, and I appreciate that because it was interesting discussion because the 450 was kind of like across the state, and I've said that's not even close to the median household house price here in Salt Lake City. So would they increase it for different geographical boundaries, but also as for new construction? And I said, Salt Lake City doesn't have a lot of new construction and new developments out here. So would they be open to the idea of existing homes? And the Housing Corporation was open to some of these discussions, but I don't think they were ready to have that change to the text amendment at the time. But I think we have some inroads because of the discussions and the openness to their conversation of changing those numbers and maybe having an amendment to it in the coming years. But it will take more conversation.
Was it restricted to $450,000 on a single family detached home?
Townhomes, and I think there was townhomes and condominiums, but it was
condominiums did qualify.
We'll have to check on that one.
I'll double check the language.
But it was new construction.
It's definitely new construction.
And that was the one sticky point for Salt Lake City.
And it was essentially down payment assistance, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I think the challenge, which is, I see this argument as the increasing of that amount would potentially make a homeowner more cost burdened in their housing in Salt Lake City. So if we bumped that amount to $550, for example, then instead of maybe being at a 30% cost burden, they could be at a 50% cost burden. And so that was why they wanted to stick with that 450 number. But as I said, I think there's a lot of conversation happening around the utilization of those funds and how we can help shape those rules with the nonprofit overseeing those funds. So,
because go back, this would be a perfect program for that missing middle, right? Because it's not like we always want to have single-family homes. We want density, which would be that missing middle side of the house, the condos, the townhomes.
Yeah, that's why I want to make sure that.
And so that's could be added to the conversation, and also making it existing in the same case.
Yeah, I think existing house for sure is something that we should advocate for.
And a missing middle, right?
So Blake just pulled up. It is for condominiums, townhomes, or similar type of housing.
But new construction still.
It's new construction, yeah, and that was really to serve as a catalyst to build up the housing stock.
Yeah. I think we've talked about this before, but the issue of construction of condominiums with insurance and liability for builders and developers and architects, I'm wondering if there could be any advocacy with the state to create some sort of like secondary insurance fund to make it like to try and overcome that burden. And the reason I'm saying that is like I can't design condominiums for more than 25% of my gross annual revenue. Otherwise, insurance companies will not cover me at all for any of my projects. So it's not even a want to or have to pay a little bit more in insurance premiums to do condominiums. Like I just cannot. I will not be insured and I'll have to close my business. So there's got to be some policy levers that we can try to push on at the state level to help us, or maybe the federal level to help us with that, overcoming that issue. Because I don't think it's for lack of desire to create condominiums. It's just that the liability issue is so great that we can't do it.
That's actually really helpful feedback, and I'd like to talk with you more about that offline. I will say that also has been a really big conversation point over the past days. We're kicking off these policy conversations, looking at impediments both in state code that are blocking the development of condos and townhomes, and then also and that can be things like how we plat them, subdivision process, but then also, Ivory mentioned yesterday that there's some issues just with funding those and being able to get them out as quick as you can get out a rental product. And so we're going to be looking, that was one of the areas that we had a lot of consensus on, and just sort of our, like, let's throw everything against the wall conversation yesterday. So I'd love to talk with you more about that. It was mentioned again this morning as well. So I think we've been kind of not skirting around, but we've been talking about that for a couple of years of tackling that issue. And I think this year will be one of the years that we really kind of roll up our sleeves and figure out what the barriers are there. And, I've heard it's financing, I've heard it's code issues, I've heard there's a whole host of things that I think we need to address. So thank you for that
I do
feedback.
think it's all specific to our country, though, because I was on a panel with a professor from Winnipeg who is like an expert on housing and gentrification in Canada, and she was saying that Canada is going through a condominium boom, and that's all that is getting built in Canada is for sale condominiums. So I'm not sure exactly the differences in either the financial systems or the laws in Canada versus the United States, but I can't imagine that Canadians are like that much more eager to live in a condo than somebody that lives in our country. Like I don't think it's demand. I think it has to do with the laws and the financial system. So it might be interesting to compare the two.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful. I'll look into that as well.
But it would be nice or important also to understand how this situation that you're dealing with, like how it affects small businesses or medium-sized businesses like yours, not being able to, to increase capacity and income because of the loss. Like it almost feels like you're being limited on how much business you can make, you can do. Like, I don't think that's fair either. I mean, you could potentially have a bigger company if you were able to do, condos and more of that. So it would be nice to compare as well, how is this impacting not only the housing stock, the condos, but also the businesses that are trying to help with the construction and the design of that. Because, thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, council members. Thank you, Rudy. Thank you,
Rudy.
Angela.
Nice
Tammy
product.
and Blake.
Nice product. Thank you.
So just to remind everybody, we have already set the date for this. We did that on Tuesday. Our public hearing will be at our next formal meeting on June 6th, and we're scheduled for tentative council action on June 13th. We must adopt it by the end of June. And we are on to number 2 in our agenda, budget for Sustainability Department and the Refuse Fund. Ben Lutke from Council Policy staff will be giving us an introduction, and we have Debbie Lyons, Sophia Nichols, and Chris Bell here from the Sustainability Department and Waste and Recycling Division.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The proposed budget for sustainability is nearly $28.5 million. This is $3.5 million, or 14% more than fiscal year 2023. The department has two separate divisions. The Waste and Recycling Division operates as an enterprise fund, where revenues coming in cover expenses going out. The other division is the Environment and Energy Division, which is transitioning to be fully funded by the general fund. Fiscal year 2024 is planned to be the final year in that shift of its funding source. So fiscal year 2025, it would be just like every other general fund department. Most of the department's budget, about 90%, is in the Waste and Recycling Division. That's also where the largest cost increases are found. The larger budget, some of the main drivers are a 12% increase to the collection fees, and those are needed to cover greater costs for existing services. There's also $2.4 million for financing of new vehicles and some charging stations, because some of the new vehicles would be electric. I also want to note there's $3 million for vehicle replacements, which is a reappropriation. So this was an item you saw earlier in the fiscal year in a budget amendment. The manufacturers did not accept new orders. So those vehicle replacements are still needed. Reappropriating the funds would make sure that they're available next fiscal year when the manufacturers begin accepting orders again.
This is for waste collection vehicles?
There's a breakdown of what the vehicles are on page 2 of the staff report.
Thanks, Ben. Of course there is.
Garbage trucks and recycling trucks.
There are 2 new full-time employees, or FTEs, proposed, one in each of the 2 divisions. The first position is a container maintenance service worker in the Waste and Recycling Division. The other position would operate an expanded air quality incentives program in the Energy and Environment Division. You may recall from the last few fiscal years that the department operated a lawnmower exchange program where gas-powered lawnmowers were exchanged for electric versions. What's proposed in fiscal year 24 is to expand that program with additional funding, move to more than just gas-powered lawnmowers to other types of incentives, and add this FTE to manage the expanded program.
I have a question on that. When it was presented at community council, it was stated, at one of the community councils, I don't even remember which one, but it was stated that it was for lawn maintenance companies or yard work companies. Is that an expansion to that, or are we only focusing on commercial companies this year and not having the exchange program for residents?
So I think it's actually the other way around, where the partnership between the state and the city is ending this year. So the state would focus on commercial and the city would focus on residential.
Interesting.
And they have some additional details in their presentation about that.
It sounded like it was like more to, that it can hit more commercial. Is that because the state is expanded there? Okay, but if you're a resident in Salt Lake City and you have a gas-powered lawnmower, you can still, we still have a program for you.
We're proposing it.
Okay. If we fund this.
If we fund
it. We still have a program for you. And you're saying it's expanding now, not just the lawnmowers, but to other types of gas-powered equipment, lawn equipment.
Yes, that's what we're proposing.
We have 3 slides.
Oh.
I'm
That's
excited
the
to talk to
majority
you
of our
about them.
presentation.
All right, got it.
I'm glad
Thanks.
you're excited.
I do want to highlight there's 4 policy questions on this topic on page 4 of the staff report, and I think that's a great segue to the budget presentation.
Great. Let's do it. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, I want to thank Ben for giving our presentation for us. That was pretty much our presentation. So if you want to go to slide 4, actually. And I'll just mention that we were one of the departments that was selected to do program-based budgeting. So I'm going to describe what we the exercise that we went through and how that shaped up. So next slide, please. So in the E&E division, which is our policy division that works on these programs that we identified, we have 7 programs, not including the administration and the overhead. We have 4 program managers working across 7 programs. So many of our folks there wear multiple hats, and some of them work in 3 different program areas. So the exception is the food equity program. That has 1 dedicated program manager. So not surprisingly, the air quality program is the biggest, the most major program that we are proposing this year. And that's reflected in the budget. The base budget is just a little bit less than half of that total budget of $1 million. And that is just continuing the same work that we've been doing. And then the other half is the proposal that Sophia will be talking about. The base budget includes electrified transportation, the outreach and technical support that we provide, and the cooperations that we have with other agencies, including the DAQ. Our climate program includes, and I'll say that all of these programs have the personal services, the employee costs, included in those amounts that you see on the screen. So the climate program includes the carbon accounting platform that we use to measure greenhouse gases, on-call consulting, partnership agreements, and other miscellaneous costs. The renewable energy program is where our community renewable energy program lives. The municipal electron project costs related to that, and energy consulting costs, the noticing costs that will be coming up for the community renewable energy program this year. The energy efficiency program is our Elevate buildings or our building benchmarking costs associated with that, and personnel associated with running that program and sending out notices and doing public awareness of that program. Outreach and engagement includes our part-time and hourly staff and materials and supplies and business engagement. And we do at least one business engagement event per year for our E2 businesses. And then the food program includes the staff, as I mentioned, and some program budget of about $50,000, where we're proposing to continue the microgrant, the food microgrant program that was very successful this year. And so we'd like to continue that. The environmental management program is just staff. There's no program budget in that, in our budget for that. And we focus on environmental compliance and working with departments to make sure that we have all of the proper permits in place, and we react to environmental situations as they come up. One of the important things there to note is that the request that Public Services has made for the environmental engineer, we look forward to collaborating with them on more proactive management of our landfill relationship, as well as some other projects where we can be a little bit more, reduce the city's environmental risk. So those are our programs in E&E, and if you want to go to the next slide. This is how the waste and recycling program shakes out. This was a little easier because our budget was pretty much set up in program-based budgeting from the beginning. We do not have a separate program called container maintenance, which we do have an insight related to that, but I wanted to call that out. It does support our 3 weekly programs. And so garbage is over half of the program costs. Yard waste and recycling makes up about a quarter of the expenses. Call to haul is a lean machine, but we fulfill between 9,000 and 10,000 service calls per year, in addition to picking up illegal piles or unscheduled pickups in neighborhoods as we go out and fulfill the scheduled requests. Our education team is another great hardworking team, and they do cart inspections. You might have seen them in the neighborhoods, but they also do knock and talks where they knock on the door and talk with residents about their containers and what goes in them. They educate people at community council meetings. They do business engagement, and then they also look through the special event waste permits and the construction and demolition waste permits to help folks set up the proper waste and recycling at their events and construction projects. The glass recycling program is a voluntary curbside program. 600,000 of that 660 is a pass-through where we collect fees for that voluntary program, and residents pay an extra fee for that service, and the rest of that is a drop-off program. So that is our program-based budgeting.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
A quick question on this. On Call to Haul program and the illegal dumping, and I don't want to ask how many of those I've submitted myself because there's a lot of them, but I think I submitted 4 or 5 the last few days. I felt like they just bloom on the west side, not only on the west side, but there's a lot of them in the spring and the summer, but throughout the year. And I remember digging through this last year that your department will put up some door hangers around this. Is that happening every time that you guys find an illegal dump or garbage on it's called the Call to Haul is called end?
If we can, and Chris can clarify, but I think if we can tie a pile to a house, if it's in front of a house, we will tag it. Or
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would like to, and I'm sure that you're tracking these locations and in each different districts and parts of the city. That information is very important to me, for future, for information to see how to, improve maybe on this. I'm definitely interested in trying to curve that so people know better. We might need to, in my opinion, we probably need to do a little more of a job in explaining to the neighbors and blasting out that not to take your junk out unless you call in or schedule it. Or I'm seeing a lot of that, and it's frustrating to a lot of neighbors to see that their neighborhoods littered with piles of junk. So it is important to me that we do a better job. Not saying that we're not doing your job. I mean, saying that maybe we need more resources to do more of that outreach. Maybe on the newspaper from the West Side, the West View, a constant, especially in the spring and summer, and bilingual. The door hangers needed a little work. Last time I saw them, especially on the Spanish side, I felt like they still need to do. We need to improve on that, and maybe going the old school way of putting yard signs saying, don't dump your, call in to schedule. I mean, I don't know what else we can think of, but we need to improve on that, I believe. I also have questions about the efficiency of the program versus a spring cleaning, because every time I see a Call to Haul, I see a gigantic truck, picking up junk, is being driven across the city. And those are, diesel gigantic trucks, and then multiple trucks to pick up all this junk. So I would like to find out how, if there's a way of finding, if this is actually an efficient way of keeping up our city, versus saying, this is a location you can dump all your junk. I wonder if that's a better system or not. I'm sure that there's a lot of people that have opinions about spring cleaning. Certainly, when I came to Salt Lake City for the first time, and I drove, and I didn't know the spring cleaning was a thing, I saw the city littered with piles of junk, and I thought it was in a zombie movie or something like that. I don't like it either, but I wonder if there are ways of improving the system that we have right now, or maybe finding other solutions. Other cities, I can remember one of Bountiful, for example. They select specific parks, and they bring a bunch of big, gigantic metal container dumper type things, and they blast it out in the neighborhoods and say, this is your chance to get rid of your bulky items. Don't take them to the curb. So I have questions about how to improve this program, because I'm not sure it's getting to the neighbors quite like it should. So I would like to know a little more numbers about per district on this.
Yeah, we certainly have the data to show where we're picking up and how many piles and where they are. We would love to work with you on better communication and outreach in the neighborhoods about the service and how to use it and, the proper way to use it, and any other ideas you have to improve the service.
Yeah, and I think we're happy to show you from a footprint standpoint, we're happy to show you the reduction in footprint that we have achieved through the new program versus the old program, and how actually much more efficient it is at a lower cost, lower carbon method versus several old big diesel trucks, several diesel loaders versus a leaner set of equipment that in many cases we actually use much smaller equipment that emits much less and have an opportunity to recycle some of that material, where the old program achieved none of that. So, but to your point, love to have further dialogue. Couldn't agree with you more that there's always room to improve and drive this. We're just as passionate as you are about it.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clarification, I think I heard you ask about two separate but related issues, the call to haul program, but also the illegal dumping that goes on as well. You want data on both?
Yeah, I guess, ideally there wouldn't be illegal dumping if everybody knew that the call to haul program, is as efficient as it is, and I've done myself. So I think those two are related to me. So if I had information about the illegal dumping, maybe it will help us improve the call to haul program. So yes, the information about those two, it will be important to me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The answer was yes. Go ahead.
Okay, with that, I will, next slide, please. And I think it's Sophia.
Great. Hello, everyone. Great to be with you. So on the next slide, please. This is a table describing the insights that we're going to talk about. We have some more at the end just for reference, but these are a focus for our presentation. In particular, right now I will discuss Insights 1 and 4, and then Insights 2 and 3 about the Air Quality Incentives Program we will talk about in a moment. So Insight number 1, this is our general fund transfer. As many of you might know, we proposed in fiscal year 22 a gradual transfer of general fund support to our division. This will be the last year of that transition before next year being fully incorporated into the general fund. So this year's transfer is a little over 1.4 million, which is an increase of 128,000 and change. Insight number 4, just to note this is something that has come up in the past budget discussions, but we are moving sustainability has been responsible for the O&M contracts and work related to our stations. We're transferring that over to public services. So it's budget neutral to the city, but you'll see that reflected as a change in our budget. Next slide, please. So I have 2 slides on this air quality incentives program. So bear with me for all the text, but I think there's a lot we can get into here. We're really excited about this because there's a lot that the city and that we have done over the years on air quality through strategy, policy, and program development. This is what you'll see in our base air quality program budget there on the left, which includes electrified transportation, communications and outreach, air quality, technical expertise, internal coordination across the city departments and divisions, as well as grant management. We've been lucky to be able to use a lot of grants for our air quality work to augment it. So we'll continue that work that you see there on the left in our base budget, keeping the EV charging station installations. And then on the right, you can see here what our incentives program ask is. So with strong support from the mayor, we're proposing a program to improve air quality and reduce emissions at the neighborhood and at the home level. This is something that we are excited about. We feel like it's important and impactful because it can have a meaningful impact when it might be really hard to control everything else around our air quality. As you know, we have these mountains, we have weather, we have wildfire smoke, but We can swap out lawnmowers, we can provide incentives for e-bikes, and we can help deploy tools for improving indoor air quality that will have measurable impacts for our residents. So we're still in the planning phase, but the goal is to look at standing up a residential program for yard equipment designed specifically for Salt Lake City residents, in addition to rebates for electric bikes, as well as indoor air quality tools such as air purifiers, filters, and monitors. So as we discussed earlier, in the past couple of years, we've partnered with the State Division of Air Quality on their lawnmower exchange program, which was great because they did all of the work, and it is a lot of work. But we're really just at the mercy of whatever they decide to do with their program. As was mentioned, this year they decided to change the focus from residents to the commercial lawn care business sector. So we are still partnering with them for the remainder of this calendar year on that, but we very much feel like it's complementary to be able to focus at the resident level, and we've gotten a lot of questions and requests for that. And I'll just say that for each incentive, we would look to partner with existing nonprofits, work with agencies and businesses that are already contemplating or wanting to do some of this work rather than just launching something solely through the city. So next slide, please. So because metrics are important, anytime we are launching a new program, we have some here for you that we are contemplating that we would be tracking. So for all of them, we would be tracking over participants overall, as well as participants by zip code and council district. And then each of these would have some kind of equity component, which would be slightly different depending on the nature of the incentive and the technology. For yard equipment, the good news about this is when you swap out a two-stroke machine for an electric machine, it has a pretty significant air quality impact. So we would be tracking tons of pollution reduced, as well as the number of units replaced, in addition to the overall participation. For example, the last 2 years that we partnered with the state, we were able, just with Salt Lake City's funding, to reduce over 8 tons of emissions from our program participation, and that's an annual number if you think about people using their equipment every year. On the e-bike program, there's a lot we could talk about here, but we've been having a lot of conversations with various partner organizations, Bike Utah, the University of Utah, UCare, potential bike shops, and others and the city of Denver, because they have had a pretty successful program over the last year that we've been able to talk with them about. So for this one, we would certainly have an income qualified component of it. And then it's really important to do some kind of participation survey after the fact, because that's really how you're going to be able to extrapolate what the cost savings is, as well as the emissions reduced from the behavior that you're tracking. That would include, miles, how often do you ride, what's the replaced vehicle trip, et cetera, et cetera. And I can go into some of the Denver data if you want, but I know we don't have a lot of time here. So, and then finally, on the indoor air quality front, this is a little bit harder to quantify in terms of personal health metrics. We certainly know that indoor air quality, there's greater awareness about the impacts of indoor air quality. The good news is there's a lot that that people can do at the behavior level. So part of this would be working through existing partnership programs. We've talked with NeighborWorks, we've talked with our own Housing Stability Division, we've talked with the Utah Community Action Program, we've talked with the county, we've talked with the West Side Coalition. Everyone is very interested in doing more around indoor air quality, and they want to work with us. And so for each of those, it would be a conversation to learn how it could plug more into the existing programs that they have. But we're really excited about that, because even though outdoor air quality is a problem, we spend most of our time indoors, and there's a lot that can be done to improve indoor air quality in a pretty cost-effective way.
So one other thing I wanted to add is part of this incentive request or expansion, we are requesting another full-time employee because there is a significant amount of work to continue these conversations with partners and figure out the right combination of factors to make the partnership successful, as well as the administrative tasks of putting those partnerships in place and the contracts in place on our end, and the systems for tracking the data and the metrics.
Thanks, Debbie. Yeah, if you can actually go back to the previous slide really quickly. I got so excited about metrics that I forgot to mention that. Yes, we know this will take a fair amount of work, and that they're really, in our mind, go hand in hand. So, and with that, that's the end of my part of the presentation. So if you can go forward 2 slides, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Okay. It's good to be with you all. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thanks. This is a summary of our 5 insights from our division. The first 3 are expense related, and the last 2 are on the revenue side. Our largest expense categories that are captured in the first couple there are employee compensation costs, costs related to fleet, from capital, equipment financing, maintenance, and fuel, that are all just rising due to inflation, as you've heard. The third is our request for 1 additional FTE, as has been mentioned. Then last are on the revenue side, our proposed residential rate increase and some changes we are proposing to our special event fees. Next slide, please.
1 additional FTE, or
yes,
it said 1.4, so it was like 14 additional FTE.
No, I'm sorry, that's a PL. It's a PL 14.
Okay, that makes sense. I was confused.
Thanks. So our inflationary costs are really just unfortunately on trend with the rest of inflation here. And as been mentioned in the staff report, the first one related to capital really, although it appears to be a step change from current fiscal year, it's really a proposed reappropriation of some capital budget. So it's really not much of a change. Frankly, it's actually a reduction, which I'll show in a slide to come. Maintenance, fleet maintenance and fuel are both following what our fleet division has recommended to us, and then our tipping fees are according to what's planned by our landfill that we co-own with the county. And compensation reflects the increase that it's been recommended in the mayor's budget. Next slide. So this is all the detail behind our capital increase request. We wanted to provide all this information in case you were interested in seeing exactly how we would allocate all of that capital to replacement assets if you were interested. All of these replacements are, well, first of all, they are all replacements. There's not any additional new units being requested, and they are all according to our fleet recommended schedule and also in accordance with our joint resolution to transition to an electrified fleet. Again, half of those refuse packers are side load garbage or recycling trucks were approved in Budget Amendment 2 in this current fiscal year, although we were not able to order those due to supply chain constraints, so we're just requesting to have that reappropriated. Supply chain issues remain very real, still very challenging, and we need to budget, though, and have that budget available to be in the queue. And right now, for large equipment, we are still experiencing delays of 18 to 24 months. The EV-ready portion of that infrastructure is because we have to install infrastructure for our 4 new electric sedans, but we plan to do this in a cost-effective way to include future capacity by also installing the wiring capacity to add up to 3 stations to charge up to 6 light-duty vehicles in the future. And next slide. Okay. This is our request for 1 additional FTE that is a container maintenance worker at a PL 14. This would be adding a 3rd person to an already busy staff of 2 that provide critical year-round support to all of our curbside collection programs as well as all of our special events. This team has seen increased demand over the last few years with just with growth and with special events coming back now after the pandemic, and we've met that demand through temp labor, but As we know, that is a challenge to fulfill on a consistent basis. So we feel it's time to add an FTE here. In doing so, though, it provides an excellent entry-level opportunity for someone to step into a career at the city, and certainly offers a lot of opportunity for advancement in our division and beyond. So feel well justified in that request. Next slide, please. This is our proposed residential service fee increase. This is actually phase 3 of our multi-year plan that we were able to start in fiscal 22 to reach and maintain our target cash balance of 18% of operating revenue and more CPI-aligned fee increases each year. This is a path that was supported by a customer survey that we conducted in 2019 that overwhelmingly said they are in favor of small, regular annual increases rather than larger, sporadic ones. And prior to the start of this plan in FY22, we had gone 8 years without a fee increase and subsequently worked our cash balance down during that time. And we were set to implement this or propose this in fiscal 21, but with the onset of the pandemic, we waited until fiscal 22. So we are proposing a 12% increase to our fee this year that covers all 3 weekly curbside services, call-to-haul collection has been discussed, and holiday tree collection as well. And then a small $1.10 per month rate increase for our multifamily properties and small businesses that just subscribe to our recycling service and receive garbage service elsewhere. I will note we have sent a mailer notifying residents of this proposed increase this week that folks have received and have also already started calling us to begin downsizing conversations, which we always welcome to. We always want to talk folks through however they can help manage that cost for themselves and then better divert waste, meet those diversion goals as well.
I have a question.
Please.
On the multifamily
Yes.
recycling only program, is that something that individual tenants or residents can do, or does the whole property have to do it?
The tenants can certainly push for it and request it, but it ultimately it's either the property manager or the building owner that service is through.
And it's for like mid-size. It's not for the very large apartments either, right?
Right. Only up to a fourplex.
Okay, that's interesting, Mr. Chair. To that point, I've seen many multi-unit apartments, many of them new, that are not offering that service. And it's to me concerning that new development in our city. It's not even considering offering that service to our residents. So I wonder if there is a hole in our ordinances, or if there is a way for us to.
We have an ordinance that we enforce to that.
How do we
that exact
enforce
point.
that ordinance? What does enforcement look like for that ordinance?
Wouldn't it be at the building permit level where they have to show, or maybe in the building, in the permit initial, like you have to show that you're providing space for recycling.
That is correct.
So otherwise, you're not approved. You're missing something.
But I believe that is there a way to enforce when they provide the space for recycling, but then they don't actually provide the service for recycling?
So the enforcement, what happens is a tenant can complain that they don't have the service. It's a complaint-based system.
The sustainability division?
Yes, and then our education team will go out and contact the building manager or owner and help them set up a recycling program and educate them on the ordinance.
That's a
I
dialogue.
have a form we'll share with you that we share.
Soon.
That's what we need.
Please do. We work really hard. This is when I was in the planning division. I worked with Debbie with this ordinance, and I remember being yelled at some business groups and development groups saying, "You guys are crazy. The city wants us to put this here. Like, this is an incredibly expensive issue that we don't have to worry about." But that council passed it. So yes, have people complain. If you're not getting the recycling service, Salt Lake City, please submit a complaint, because we worked really hard many years ago to make this happen, which is now, today, we think it's just a given, right? Like it's
Yeah.
a normal thing to have and it's the right thing to do for our environment.
My other question regards to recycling is I know that this doesn't happen in our region, but I don't know why it doesn't, why glass recycling has to be opt-in and a private service. And because my understanding, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that actually glass and aluminum are the two that like you can recycle over and over forever and the material doesn't degrade. So actually recycling glass is, and a lot of the recycling that we put in our blue can actually ends up in the landfill depending on if we can't use it or things like that. I know that we recycle things, but like my understanding is that the plastics and things like that degrade over time, but glass and aluminum can be recycled indefinitely. So it would be a priority for me for us to get that included in the base service, and I'm wondering what that would take. If you could help.
Yeah,
answer
to your
that
point, I
question,
mean,
that'd be great.
that's an excellent idea to look at potentially including that in the base service. You're right about the nature of glass and aluminum recycling being infinite, without any material or yield loss over time. But best practice with regard to that material specifically is to keep it separate because of the impact it has on other materials in the single stream, not only the materials but the equipment that's sorting it. It can be very destructive to all the other materials in the stream. So best practice is to keep it separate, but excellent point to envision including that in the base fee.
I understand that, and I know it would be an extra can that people have, and that may be cumbersome or a burden, but I think it's a burden that's well worth
We'll
us
take a look at that.
looking at because of how
Yeah,
important
we can
recycling
look
is.
at putting it in the base service. One thing to note, though, so the recycling markets are very localized, right? So the closer you can recycle it, the more economical it is. And so most of the glass that we recycle here actually goes into fiberglass insulation, so it's kind of an end use.
Oh, really?
There's a regional end. Yeah, it's a regional end use, and our contracted recycler is the only glass processor in the state.
And they service the Intermountain West. So from Idaho,
How do we
Nevada.
get someone else to start recycling glass?
So it's a little bit capital intensive, and it's for a frankly a pretty low value material.
I think if any of you would be interested in both a tour of our recycling facility as well as a tour of the glass facility, I think that would be
Arrange that.
really
Answer is yes.
a good use of time.
Happy
I
to.
think we know some people.
Yeah.
Please.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
Chris has got a cool program.
Quick question.
I don't know who's talking.
I mean, this might be it is probably a policy question, but I think since I remember now, it would be interesting to find out a little more. I always have questions about gas stations and their garbage, because most of the stuff that I'm taking from my car to the I think many of us clean our cars when we're putting gas in them, and I have soda cans and all of these older materials that are recyclable, but you never find an opportunity to separate your junk from in a gas station. I wonder if there is a way for us to encourage that from gas station owners or chains within our city limits. There is a lot of us that, I see those garbage cans full of cans, and I'm sure it's going straight to the dump. So I would like to find out a little more about this, if there is a way.
Did Councilmember Voldemort have a
Question.
comment?
How about the county food, how do you call that, the food processor, or where some people can actually go drop like food waste so it can get converted into
The anaerobic digester.
that one, the digester?
Mhm.
How is that? Do we have a relationship with them? Are we thinking about it maybe in the future to offer that service?
Our contracted glass recycler Momentum also provides that service on. They've rolled it out at a pilot level.
Okay.
In the Liberty Wells area.
Oh, okay.
Purple cans, if you've seen them.
Purple cans, I have not seen
As
them.
a- as
Have
a-
you?
Very many yet.
Yeah, as an optional subscription service to maybe a couple hundred households. They are interested in expanding that. They started it with a grant,
Okay.
first of all, partnership with Intermountain Healthcare. But they are interested in expanding that and starting to maybe take names as to where they would expand that. And we can share some of their proposed expansion areas. But that service is being offered through them as a subscription that's essentially a complementary service. It's because it's complementary to our existing yard waste program, because it sort of picks up where our yard waste program leaves off with respect to the spectrum of food waste that is allowable in that container versus ours, if that makes sense.
And Momentum hauls food waste for businesses and kitchens and restaurants, so they have an existing program for that.
Right.
We'll let you know.
I didn't know this. I need to
Right.
call
I know we're not
somebody.
even done with this
That was
slide.
my question. Thank you.
Oh, are we not? I can hold my questions if we need to get through the
We
rest.
have one more slide, I think.
2 more.
Oh, two.
Go ahead. I can hold questions. Go ahead.
Okay, but you're first after.
Really one.
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry, really just one.
Slide,
Thank you. Yeah, next slide.
please.
The last is our proposed changes to our special event fees. And these are our fees that we assess to recover our actual cost to provide service to the special events that request them. And these are changes both up and down that are the result of a very recent cost justification study we completed in the last couple months. The last analysis we did in 2018, so this time we took a very deep dive into making sure we're very accurate about the assumptions around actual labor and equipment costs directly related to providing this service, to be precise about it. So that is resulting in a proposed increase per container for the relatively small number of large events that we do, and then a decrease for the larger number of small events that we service, as detailed there. So, and just to point out, the $25,000 Insight impact is because we did not budget for this in the past couple of fiscal years. Because of the pandemic, we didn't have special events. With those back now, we're budgeting that, but the actual impact of these proposed fees is actually about $2,500. And then, next slide. Really, we put this in just as a wrap-up summary of all the insights that we just presented. So, then next slide. A big thank you, and that concludes our presentation. So, we'd welcome any questions.
Everyone.
Further
And I
questions.
forgot to put Ben on there, but Ben is amazing.
Thank you
Love Ben.
Thank you for bearing with all of our questions, and we're not done. Councilmember Petro.
Okay, a few things. In the budget book, on the 50% renewable electricity generation for municipal operations by 2023, we have this massive jump between 22 actual and 23 target and 24 target, going from 12% to greater than or equal to 50%. Is there some factor that contributes to that? We were talking, is that the facility finally coming online or the solar farm?
It's the Electron Solar Farm.
Okay.
Yes, and
That's really exciting. Thank you.
yes, we're very close. So close. So close.
It's really exciting.
When's the groundbreaking?
Technically, it already happened.
Oh,
We're just
okay.
waiting for
I mean
solar
the
panels that are
rhythm.
caught up
We're
in
gonna have a
trade
big-
disputes.
We're going to have a
Yeah.
big
A
thing.
thing,
and we'll
yeah.
invite all of
Let's
you.
celebrate this
and
solar
yes.
farm.
We're gonna have a big,
We'll have
big thing.
I'm not going to make a bad pun, but better than a groundbreaking.
Solar soiree.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
gonna do it on a
There you
solstice
go.
or something.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second thing about the e-bikes. I've told this to Kim Frost ad nauseum. I am fully in support of this, but I need you all to be very cognizant of barriers that go beyond just distribution. I live on the west side. I just had my 8th and 9th bike stolen from an enclosed patio. I don't want to create a stream of things that are just pawned at a higher level when they're stolen from families. When we have studios being built at 400 square feet, we should not be asking people to store these in their house. Even if they're foldable, they should be able to sleep someplace without a rubber wheel bumping into their head. So as we consider these e-bike distributions, which I think are wonderful and fantastic, I would like us to have a comprehensive citywide conversation about what that means. And on the west side, we need places to secure them, and we need places where they can be weatherproofed. Even though my patio was secured, it wasn't weatherproofed, and our bikes took a beating from the snow this winter, even when they were covered in tarps. So I believe in public-private partnerships deeply. I know Kim Frost has expressed a lot of interest in this, but the distribution cannot be the goal, otherwise our finances will not be sustainable, trying to constantly replace the thing that we have provided to fill this need. I know this probably exists in other places. Historically, red line neighborhoods all face these similar pressures, so it's not just a West Side thing. But as we do this, please have a system-wide comprehension of what it means to distribute, and I'm happy to tap in and work with you. My comprehension would be something on the schools, the elementary schools in the area, and public parks that were some kind of lock-oriented thing. Down in Zion, near Zion Park, when we were in St. George, we saw like bike lockers that, you know, I don't know how we do it. The fee needs to be low. The barrier to entry needs to be low. Ideally, a whole family's bikes could go in at once, but please, that needs to be considered.
I think we should consider our parking ordinance, because it does have bike parking mentioned in there, but it may not be adequate. So that might be something we
It's the securing and weatherproofing element.
Yeah, that might be something that, like a post-budget analyst task to help us double check our parking ordinance requirements for bikes.
And please hear me, I am not saying that I believe the city needs to pay for this, even though I acknowledge the capacity will come from your staff to drive it and to organize it. But we have a lot of interested stakeholders that could do capital projects with us, and then, you know, we would help maintain them. We would do the land use to allow it and things like that.
And I also think that's why the zoning ordinance, the parking ordinance, may be just
a good tool.
Require it to be in new buildings.
And then my final thing is, and maybe this is more a legislative intent than anything else, is it's time for us to look at what we can do feasibly around plastic bags in the city.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not alone in this.
Yeah. And on that point, though, on plastic
Are you
bags,
proud of me, Councilmember Dugan? He's smiling at me with pride.
on that point on plastic bags, there is many cities in this county that are looking into enacting ordinances regarding this. And I feel like not that we need to lead on all the issues, but this is an issue
Keep up.
Yes, we probably definitely need to keep up, and I hope that our legislator, our lobbying team, and we can get buy-in from the league and other cities and make sure that we can do this right. But that should be a big priority for our city, to get rid of plastic bags as soon as possible.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yes, to all of that. I wanted to also see if you consider, when you figure out the e-bikes and the vendors and the partnerships, that it might not just be just the bike, but also think about who's going to use the bikes, and if there's a chance to add those carts for children, because that might be an option, because, it, as much as we all want to, steer away from cars and use public transportation and bike and walk more, the reality is, for moms that have multiple children, it's hard to get them on a bike, right? It's more convenient, more convenient to have them in a car seat in a car to go 3 blocks to the supermarket versus walking, versus taking a bus or a train or a bike. So if there are some e-bikes out there that are willing to think about also partnering up and adding that extra little cart, I don't know what you call it, the wagon?
Cargo bike.
Our program.
Type of cargo bike, yeah.
I would like to see that as well, so that it becomes only just like the chore that you need to go, but also becomes fun, and I think it also encourages people to be outside more.
Let me ask a question, though. The program that you're proposing is not like a Lime scooter type of program where there's e-bikes. It's like...
They would be income qualified. And we would love your input on, what these priorities are that matter to you. I can tell you a little bit about Denver's program, just as a point of reference. So what Denver did is they had they have a part of a sales tax that goes to fund all of their sustainability initiatives. So they have a lot of money. So we're not going to necessarily be at the scale of Denver right now, but I think we can still do a lot with Salt Lake City. So what Denver does is they have a $300 rebate or discount at the point of sale. So that's very important. It's a point of sale discount for anyone who's interested and qualifies and kind of applies during their monthly window. And then they have a $1,200 rebate for income qualified. So their stats from the first year is that 67% of the funding went to income qualified residents, and that those residents actually used the bikes more than even the folks that didn't receive the income qualified. So we would be definitely looking to learn from them. We also know that our some other fellow nonprofits in the state have done a lot of thinking on this and have some other suggestions for us. So it's not decided yet by any means because there's a lot to it. But we appreciate your feedback and guidance on what's important to you.
I guess just my 2 cents would be I would lean towards targeting more or all of the funding towards income qualified families, because I think it's true.
Grew up in war zones and didn't learn to bike. So like literally we're having to create a bike culture for a lot of people who are new here. Getting your bike repaired is a weird thing, and it's not intuitive, and you can't just go to someone in a gas station and ask them where to do it like you can for a car. So any guidance around that too, to make it practically sustainable, would be helpful.
Maybe that partnership
That's
with
part. The Bicycle Collective does a lot of work with that, and the bike stores do have some things like that. So we just need to connect and also advertise and promote that, because Bike Collective does a lot of that kind of work to teach and provide the equipment and the training to take care of your bicycle. So yeah, which is also in your neighborhoods.
So this is unrelated to the bike, but it was triggered by a comment that you guys said. A point of sale, discount or rebate or whatever you call it, that Denver is using. When we're talking about mowers, I always thought about the same thing, because then you have like places like Lowe's and Home Depot that are selling gas-powered mowers within our city limits. I wonder if we can explore the idea of incentivizing the electrical purchase at the point of sale, so we are not, our city residents are buying the mowers that we don't want them to buy, and within our city limits. So it is kind of frustrating to see every time I go to Home Depot, see someone with a gas-powered mower.
We make it illegal to sell those within city limits?
Or go all the way there?
I don't know if it's in, we can
gotta go just a
certainly
little
look.
further, huh?
We can certainly look.
Dictator.
I don't know if it's
I don't
within
want to
our
send
authority.
that tax
but-
revenue down to Murray, okay?
But we can certainly look at we would have the ability with the lawnmower or the yard equipment exchange to look at some of those partnerships with those stores to say, okay, if somebody comes in with this kind of evidence that they live in the city, offer them this discount.
Yeah, I think that would make a big deal, a huge impact to try to get them from the get-go, incentivize it from the point of sale. I think that would be a big deal. So Thank you.
Lots of ideas and thoughts.
I appreciate
in our
all of
area.
these ideas, and I've learned a lot from you, and I really appreciate your feedback, because I appreciate your feedback, Councilmember Petro, on making this a program that works and that is long-lasting and sustainable, not just here we're giving you a free thing that you can take and then have stolen or whatever. But yeah.
All right, Councilmember.
We appreciate all your feedback and certainly share your passion for all of it.
Council members, I think I'm not seeing any more questions. Appreciate that. And we already did unresolved issues. We still have lots of unresolved issues. Do you want to give an update on?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cindy? Sounds like during the meeting there was some more information gathered on the.
I don't even know where to begin, but so it looks like in April 18th, the county considered this request from the county attorney's office based on the state taking action, and the legal defenders received an appropriation from Salt Lake County. They have not yet received raises, but when they do, as of July 1, they will receive those retroactive to April 1. The depending on who you talk to at the county, they are there's an assertion that LDA is planning to give raises to all of the people who are prosecutors in courts that work for LDA. That is peculiar because the city pays for part of those. So we'll try to get to the bottom of that. And Alejandro is helping us. Thank you. And let's see. So it's possible that if the city doesn't find the money to give the city prosecutors the entire raise as of July 1, it is possible that even the LDAs will make more money, the city LDAs will make more money than the city prosecutors. That all sounds unusual, so we're trying to trace back. The county had the opportunity to analyze the LDA salaries, and so I need to get that information. We don't have a written request from either LDA, the county people who manage the contract, or the district attorney's office on any of this. So I've asked them for written information on the attorneys, on the prosecutors, and then we'll work together with Councilmember Pui to get a written request or written information from legal defenders or the county, as well as the documentation on their salaries. So I would say that there's a lot of loose ends.
And maybe we can't answer this right now, but I kind of guess that, like, Chris probably could. I was under the assumption that, like, we're kind of comparing slightly different models, right? The city prosecutors are city employees that just happen to be managed by a county building person, attorney, all that stuff. Whereas I thought the LDA was just like a group of attorneys, and we don't have a specific, you are the city LDA and you are the county LDA, right? It's not like we have a specific person that is assigned to only city cases. Is that true?
Almost. So LDA, think of LDA just like a law firm, but it's a nonprofit organization, and a certain percentage or like a working group of that firm is assigned to Salt Lake City cases. So at any given moment, yes, there would be, maybe 6 or 8 attorneys that are just working cases in Salt Lake City Justice Court, or just working Salt Lake City cases in district court. But they're on that team.
Maybe a different way to ask the question is, that's helpful, thank you. Maybe another question is, we don't control the salary for that. We just give them a lump sum and they use that to do whatever they want. Like, it goes into a LDA general budget and then that trickles down? Or does our salary, does us not increasing when the county does mean that our specific people get paid? Like, do we set the salary for those people?
I'm not sure exactly, but because we contract directly with them, I'm sure that that's something that we could do, which I think is the reason why we have 2 separate contracts, is to say, like, this is our contribution for providing
our services
defense against Salt Lake City cases.
I see.
Whereas the vast majority of their contract is with the county to provide defense services for people countywide.
Okay.
So
still unclear.
I think, and I'm carrying it out just logically, one way to look at it is that if they do give all of the people within their organization a raise right now, and they don't ask the city for more money than they've already asked for, I would assume, unless they have other sources of funding, later in the year they'll have a problem. So we'll do our best to find out. The contract as proposed by the administration that had the input of the LDA did have an increase in it, but it wasn't on the scale of anything that would address this. I think what happened is all of this came to pass in April, and so that's why we're playing catch-up.
Okay. I think the discussion we had previously, I still feel the same as I did, is that this is important. It may be something we have to wait until after budget to figure out. And if to the extent that it is a priority for us, I want us to, as Councilmember Petro said, put some sort of placeholder amount in that we can figure out what it actually means later. And I guess, so, yeah.
I mean, I would structure it this way, and this is just my feeling. I don't know if this is like a straw poll or whatever, but listening to what all of you have said, and maybe I'm biased because this is the way I feel. It's not that we don't care about wanting to narrow the gap or eliminate the gap between county prosecutors and city prosecutors, but I think in order of priority, the step needs to be, number one, if you have defense attorneys and city prosecutors that are working in the same building, in the same courtrooms, on the exact same cases, the first priority is that they make the same. The second priority is that if we have city employees working alongside, city prosecutors working alongside county prosecutors that happen to be in the same building and are managed by the same person, which is SIM, we want to get parity there, but that needs to be the second priority. And so whichever comes first, whether LDA is going to get a raise that brings them above our city prosecutors, or whether they aren't getting that raise, the way I've just said it means that the parity structure goes there, the prioritization goes to put those two on equal footing first.
Whichever direction
it goes.
I think I would agree with that.
Right, and we'll just keep requesting information. And we had originally scheduled the attorney's office budget to be on our first budget discussion night, but because we thought we could figure this out quickly, we delayed that. So they will be here on June 1. So Sim Gill and Ralph Chamness will be here on June 1, I believe, to address it. So, but we'll try to. I'm texting back and forth with Ralph. So, thanks.
And yes, and we're going to get to the bottom, I think, today, hopefully, to some more clarity on this.
All right. I do not have a report. Vice Chair does not have a report. Any other executive director announcements? Cindy? All right. We have no closed session, so we are adjourned.
Oh, go team.
Okay.